So we've had a few chats in the live calls about hip rolling. The common setup is either side lying or supine, so on your feet on your back in like that 90-90 position, either feet on the wall or feet on a box. They're the most common ones. We're going to start with the seated variation today, and this is what I actually prefer. This is where I spend most of the time when I'm coaching this. I think the reason is because you can control pelvic position a little bit better. It's also a little bit more specific to like just standing based movements because we're obviously seated, we're not on the ground. But obviously in terms of a progression and to make it easier, down on the ground will be easier because you get more proprioceptive feedback. There's just less gravity demand of managing trunk and all of that sort of stuff. So there's some considerations for the position that you're in. The seated is definitely my favorite. Ultimately though, when we think of, do you want to just do a few reps? When we think of this drill, what is actually going on and why might it be helpful for people? So a lot of the times coaches will talk about it being an internal rotation of the hip, which it definitely is. I was first exposed to this exercise, or this, not this variation, but this idea through PRI. And that is the whole idea of creating an internal rotation and adduction on one of the sides of the hip. So actually like turning the femur in and actually pulling the pelvis to close space a little bit towards that side. And we're creating an adduction and an IR moment on that hip. And quite often it is called an adductor pullback, is another variation. It's just a jargon term to describe what we're doing because we're using the adductor to pull ourselves back into position. And quite often it's only ever coached on the side that we're pulling back. However, what we'll chat about today is there's some cool shit happening on the other side as well because there's a relative ER abduction happening on the opposite side that we're pulling in from. And depending on what you're looking for with your clients or what you're looking to explore and create some sensory awareness of position and motor control with, that ER side might be a little bit more beneficial for you. So there's benefits to both. But for the most part, I like the seated variation because we can also play around with pelvic position. So we can create a bit more of an anterior tilt, sit a little taller. We can also slump and pull back into a posterior tilt, where most of the time the pressure in the arse that I'm looking for is your sit bones. We're trying to find your sit bones. So there's sort of like, if you can find and sense those sit bones, we're probably in a good position. It means the pelvis is kind of just sitting there in space. If we roll too far back and lose those sit bones, all of a sudden we're kind of slumped on our arse cheeks, on our glute, and that's a really aggressive posterior tilt. If we go too far forward and start to feel pressure under the base of the hamstring and lose the sit bones with an anterior tilt and roll too far, we're now in an anterior tilt position. And there's some considerations for what we're looking for with the feelings, and we'll coach through them now, but that's why I like the seated variation, because you can manage your pelvic position in space a little bit better. It's easier to feel. The other thing is, on a stool, you can also go against a wall and you can feel if there's too much rotation happening through the trunk. So as we start to pull in and out, we don't want to see aggressive turns and reorientations of the entire axial skeleton. We're trying to create a relative change in position at the hip. So the femoral neck and head of the femur speaking to the pelvis through the acetabulum. That's where we're trying to isolate as much of this rotation from as possible. So anything that's happening up chain with a lumbar turning or a rib cage turning or any of those sort of things is kind of what we want to get away from. And that's why I like the seated variation. So I'm going to get you to find your sit bones. Back on the wall, sit bones on. I like a foam roller because there's some external cues that we can talk about with this, but one of the main things is I say, like, pretend this is a clock face and you're looking at the 12 o'clock. I want the 12 o'clock to be pulled around as you pull back. So we're turning this clock face. It just becomes like a little game. And if you've got the setup right, the leg that we pull back in, we should feel a groin on that side. You've got that? Yeah. Do you feel anything on the left side? Nothing at all? Yeah. Cool. So go back to just neutral. So if we now, obviously we can pull that leg back and create the adduction IR here of the hip, but we could also push this knee forward. And if we've got the setup right, we should light a glute med up here. So if we drive this knee forward, clock face now goes the same way, but we're pushing it, what do you feel?
I feel it immediately.
Glute med. And that's going to be our external rotation, relative hip motion by driving this leg forward. So you can cue it on either side. And ultimately with hip rolling, it's going to start with feeling the end ranges like most motor control drills, take them to the end range, contextualize the end range, create the sensory stuff that we need that we can go back to. So it's going to start with just feeling out those end ranges of a pull back or a push forward. So go through both sides. Can you create both feelings, left and right?
Better on the left, getting that right. Heaps of groin.
Heaps of left groin, yep. Can you get right groin when you pull back the other way?
Yeah.
Yep. Can we go left? So this would be out here. Do we have that? Yep.
A little bit.
A little bit. Pull back the other way. Do we get it out there?
Yep.
A little bit. So we just started to create that sensory feeling. Depending on what specifically you're looking for, are we trying to increase that IR or are we trying to increase that ER? You might change what you're cueing and coaching around, but it can be used for both of them. It's not always this pullback position and this relative adduction IR that always needs to be coached. There's benefits to both of them. A couple of key things with our pelvic position. One of the easy, simple tips that I recommend starting to just be aware of, especially when you start to do like, if you do any abduction, open chain abduction, and any of these like kickback variations, a lot of the time clients will tell you that they feel the front of their hip. And ultimately that's your TFL starting to come in, which means we're not actually creating this ER'd relative position that the posterior glute med will have. One of the easiest ways that you can identify with clients, and this is going to be part of this, is if you just pretend to put your hand in your pocket and just sit your hand in your pocket, anything in front of that is going to be our anterior fibers that IR the hip. So it's going to be your anterior glute med and it's going to be your TFL. Anything that's behind your hand here is going to be your posterior fibers that ER the hip. So that's going to be your posterior glute med fibers. So just a little like context cue that you can have with clients if they're aware of that. And if we go back to the one where we've pushed away. So I want you to find right lateral hip. So right knee goes forward. Is that behind that crease or is that in front of the crease? Over here.
Now
it's behind. So we're getting that ER, that relative ER. If I got James to now anteriorly tilt, I reckon it's going to go straight to the front. And that's a really easy way for you to start to manage pelvic position and shift tension, because the tension response is just directed to the bones and where the bones are in space. But to manage that pelvic position, to shift it to more of a glute med or an anterior. In this one, you'd probably never want that anterior hip. You want to try to find and manage the pelvic position to get it backside of the pocket, because that's actually going to be that glute med that ERs and starts to create a little sensory awareness of what that position is and what that feels like. So that's, again, this is why I prefer the seated variation, because you can cue and coach the proximal structure so much easier, which just dictates the whole thing. With this exercise, obviously we're trying, it's sensory, so it lives at that end of the continuum. We're literally just trying to learn how to create this relative motion of the pelvis in space and the muscular tension response that comes from that. So it's very sensory and it can really be used for a wide variety of things. It's probably going to be more of an entry point with people. If people have like a stiff low back or stiff hips, or they feel like they're uneven or any of those sort of things, just greasing and grooving as part of a warm-up or superset with a main lift can be really easy. This is also something that could just become like homework for a client that, hey, twice a day when you're at your desk, I want you to just take a minute, focus on your breathing and just pull in and out as just like a little bit of sensory homework for them to feel the position that they're in and regain some of that relative motion of this area. General warm-ups, great, just pair it with 2 or 3 exercises, get them moving in the start of the session, especially for more sedentary people, or paired with a main lift or paired with an accessory. So maybe we're doing like a B-stance hinge and we're really trying to feed and find this loading on the leg. Doing some of these, just superset, go crush a set and then go and just do some seated ones is really important and can really help people. So it is sensory. It's not training unless you're dealing with a properly rehab-based client. Most people will pick it up pretty quickly, and then it's starting to layer those feelings into their actual session or what we're looking for. What we will go through just quickly is the 2 other setups for it. So on your back now, feet on the box. So this one will just be your 90-90 variation. Squeezing the roller just a little bit. We don't really want to like force the low back down, but we don't want too much of an arch. So it's kind of just like a little bit of tension down into the floor. Sometimes a little reach here can help hold that position. We don't want aggressive flexion, so we don't really want to tuck heaps, but a little reach might help someone just feel and sense a little bit of ab wall supporting that pelvis. And then from there, we might just go through the same thing. The thing to look out for here is really aggressive like shifting and lateralization of the pelvis. We're kind of just trying to learn to pivot in and out, forward and like up and down, rather than these like aggressive lateralizations. Again, clock face, knee comes up, that's better, and then this knee comes up. Good. Can you find those same feelings here? A little harder?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is a little bit harder down here. Again, I just prefer the seated. I love the seated variation of this. It's definitely my favorite. But you can play around with it here. Sometimes people use a little ball here and really get quite big with it. It's struggling here, aren't you?
That right side's fucking
Tough?
yeah.
Yep. That's looking better. Think about knee position. You're changing elevation of knees. This one goes down, this one comes up, 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 up. Good, now switch. This one comes up, this one comes up, this one comes up. There we go. Now this one comes up. Nice, and we can see that the roller is rotating there as well. You can use that clock face. So this is another variation that you may use. The other one would be side lying. So just go on your side, feet on the wall. Same position, but we are now side lying. For this one, you're mainly just talking about the top leg. So we're just driving feet flat, yep. Top knee goes forward and you just roll that hip forward just a touch and then bring it back in space. So a lot of this is going to be more biased on this top hip here. Side lying offers a little bit different tension response of some of the muscles. So some people might find this a little bit easier. But it's all the same principles once you know what you're looking for. For this, I'd probably get James to support his head with his arm like a pillow. Yeah, that's sort of the position we want. And rolling. You might also get some people that talk about like elevating this bottom rib cage a little bit. That can help change some of that hip tension response as well. It probably brings it into a more of a neutral position, just so you're not slumped into the floor. But they're all just little variations of the same thing. What we're talking about is creating and regaining this relative motion of the hip driven via IRs and ERs. IR on the pullback side and ER on that push forward side. In terms of programming, paired with your main lift, paired with an accessory in a general warm-up or homework, we actually already touched on that. This is definitely something that I'd recommend playing with yourself before trying to use it with clients. If you need to, send me a video of you doing it and let's chat through it. Otherwise, questions down below or let me know how it's all going, but we'll see you in the next one.